Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Diep with the Deep Dive, and today I will be ranking all 9 films in Quentin Tarantino's 28-year career. The man is a living embodiment of Los Angeles pop culture. Everywhere you go in any part of Hollywood or Film Central, you will always see some sort of direct reference to a Tarantino film, whether it be street art, bad motherfucker merchandise, or just a bunch of women walking around with Mia Wallace haircuts. There's no denying that Tarantino in his films and his love of films directly referenced in his own movies has had an abundance of influence on the style, fashion, and even personalities of generations X, Y, Z, and millennials. Now, there are some who feel that Tarantino is just a pervert and a violence fetishist who borderlines on self-indulgence and jerks himself off to his own showing of film knowledge directly referenced or even copied and labeled as his own in his own movies. While there is some, I said, some truth to that, I feel personally that Tarantino is one of the few filmmakers where, like it or not, he's able to produce something that's original in its own unique and sometimes strange ways as compared to the abundance of remakes, spin-offs, and shitty so-called Netflix original films we get nowadays. So most of this ranking comes from a good place as I'm personally a fan of his work. Although I don't really consider him one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, as his style of filmmaking and storytelling has seemed to become sort of repetitive over time, it's still for the most part entertaining and influential enough to take a look at. So without further ado, let's rank the films of Quentin Tarantino. Okay, so Death Proof is legitimately Tarantino's only bad movie. Like, objectively bad. When Tarantino was asked why he only wanted to make 10 films in his entire career and not continue after, his response was that he didn't want to get to a point in his career where he would end up making something as bad as Death Proof. Well, he's not wrong. Although Death Proof was ultimately made to look and feel bad and cheesy on purpose, given that it's a grindhouse B-movie style romp, it still fails to execute on all cylinders. The first half of the film is far superior than the second half, as we get a pretty awesome introduction and performance from Kurt Russell as a smooth-talking, blood-hungry stuntman Mike, and it's a fun, strange time. I also love Vanessa Ferlito as the cautious but somewhat easily manipulated Arlene, who ends up at the same bar that stuntman Mike usually hangs out with to find new victims. But the second half lacks any energy and turns into almost a slapstick action movie. Stuntman Mike is reduced to a babbling idiot, and we get a prolonged chase sequence that's more tiresome than it is entertaining. The subversion of expectations didn't work for me either, and the film as a whole was a complete mess.
Do it! Do it!
The Hateful Eight is not Tarantino's best. I know there are a few out there who think that this is one of his stronger films, but for me it just didn't work or mesh as well as I wanted it to. Despite some great performances from Samuel L. Jackson and Kurt Russell as bounty hunters who end up in a small cabin with strangers who don't fully trust one another, the environment of Hateful Eight is pretty damn good. Tarantino's excessive shots of the snow and the characters' behaviors towards one another is decent foreshadowing of a bloodbath in the making. While I do enjoy the overall atmosphere and performances from the cast overall, the film suffers from its long runtime that often takes too long to get to where it wants to go. There's also way too much exposition and explanation for certain events that unfold, and for a film like this, we don't need extra scenes to explain everything that we've seen before. I actually like the idea of having more mystery to everything. Not everything needs to be explained. That's what made his earlier films like Reservoir Dogs work so well. Tarantino's screenplay, when it comes to the story, halts itself much too often and sort of just lingers around. But I will say Ennio Morricone's score is badass and helps attribute to the mood of the film and elevates it to another level, which is refreshing given that Tarantino didn't need to rely on a soundtrack to transition from scene to scene, so it's pretty awesome to see that Morricone not only composed the score for this film, but also won an Oscar for it.
And I stuck my big black Johnson right down his goddamn throat.
Jackie Brown seems to be a sleeper hit for the biggest Tarantino fans, and it's actually his least Tarantino-y film. That's mostly because it's actually based on a novel called Rum Punch by Elmore Leonard. It's a fun ode to 60s and 70s crime films, and the soundtrack and low-key production with only a few set pieces helps establish the world of Jackie Brown, who's played strongly by Pam Grier, with a supporting cast of Sam Jackson, Robert De Niro, Bridget Fonda, Michael Keaton, and the late Robert Forster, who turns in a career-best performance as the always cool and calm bail bondsman, Max Cherry. It's a decent film with memorable sequences, particularly the scene between Chris Tucker and Sam Jackson.
Man, you must be out of your fucking mind if you think I'm finna get in this dirty-ass trunk.
We ain't going nowhere but to Koreatown, man.
Man, I ain't riding in no goddamn trunk for no minute, man. Why I can't ride up front with you?
I can't believe you do me like this.
Do you like what, man? I just ain't climbing in no goddamn dirty-ass trunk, man.
The film almost shoots itself in the foot about halfway through when its constant exposition scenes keep coming about, but it picks itself back up in, you guessed it, the third act when everything comes together. Alright, so I'm going to count Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 as one movie because that's what Tarantino originally intended, and it'll make this list go by a lot easier. The film stars Uma Thurman as a woman set out on a quest for revenge after having her life pretty much destroyed, but that is quite the understatement. Whereas Volume 1 is a violent homage to samurai revenge films with an almost pop-heavy soundtrack and over-the-top action sequences and violence, Volume 2 is a much more mature film that slows itself down and takes time to tap into the mindset of its remaining villains left on the bride's revenge list, almost humanizing most of them before they're tracked down. I honestly really enjoyed that although it's all part of the same story, that both volumes are different in tone and pace. It's almost like they're completely different movies that are all part of the same narrative. David Carradine and Michael Madsen are fantastic in this, as well as Lucy Liu and Daryl Hannah. And Uma Thurman gives one of her most iconic performances as the bride. If you want hyper-stylized violence followed by mostly dialogue-filled confrontation, check this one out. Now this is a movie you're either gonna love or hate. It's basically a 2.5-hour movie of Tarantino showing us how much he loves old Hollywood, particularly 60s Hollywood. The film plays out like a day in the life of a fading, insecure actor played hilariously by Leonardo DiCaprio and a mysterious but very confident stuntman played by the never-aging Brad Pitt. These two performances and their on-screen chemistry are the strength of this movie. If their chemistry doesn't work, the movie doesn't work, but luckily it does. The only real negatives I have about this movie is there's certain material that could have been left on the cutting room floor, but Quentin Tarantino really just had to show off all of his film trivia knowledge and his undying love of dirty-ass feet, particularly that of Margot Robbie's and Margaret Qualley. Not to mention that despite the ending everybody loves talking about, nothing really happens beforehand, and the characters are pretty much unchanged from beginning to end. This is basically a day-in-the-life movie, so don't come in thinking you're gonna get a whole 60s timeline type film. We're essentially just spending a day with these characters with a few flashbacks in between and one jump in time. I can definitely see where the film borders on self-indulgence and pure nostalgic homage. Despite that, the production design is excellent and the movie is pretty much enjoyable all the way through. If there's one reason to see this, it's to see the awesome lead performances by DiCaprio and Pitt.
It's official, old buddy. Well, has been.
What are you talking about? What did that guy tell you?
Told me the goddamn truth is what he told me.
Whoa, whoa. Hey,
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that.
here, put these on. Don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
Inglourious Basterds is the film I feel Tarantino always wanted to make most for the longest time, and for the most part, it's pretty good in many different ways. The opening scene of the film sets a fantastic tone and is followed by something that's almost completely the opposite in terms of tone and subtext, which demonstrates just how strong the screenplay for this movie can be. It's a tremendous cast with great performances, specifically that of Christoph Waltz, who plays Colonel Hans Landa, a ruthless, cunning, and clever SS officer who always seems one step ahead of the titular heroines. This is one of Tarantino's best shot, edited, and even humorous films. The ending is a little bloated and over the top as usual, and if I had to point out my biggest negative with the movie, it's actually Eli Roth, who I feel is a terrible fucking actor and a pretty mediocre director who almost ruins every scene he's in the movie, and I really wish that Adam Sandler was available to play the Bear Jew as originally envisioned instead, but sometimes dreams just can't come true. I mean, imagine Bobby Boucher just bashing in the brains of Nazis with a baseball bat. That'd be the greatest thing ever captured in film. Other than that, Inglourious Basterds is a fun, wild time. Django Unchained had me hooked from the opening scene and had my interest pretty much the whole way through. Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz are a perfect movie pair as Django Freeman and Dr. King Schultz respectively. Their adventures in bounty hunting and their eventual stop at Candyland are built up and paced very well, and DiCaprio never overdoes it despite the very heavy southern drawl he has for the antagonist character of Calvin Candy. The entire first act leading to the end of the dinner transaction sequence is some of Tarantino's finest work in both screenwriting and direction. The ending, however, falters and drags a bit, which keeps it from taking a higher spot on my list. Not to mention, the film features the worst Tarantino cameo ever, but then it picks itself back up towards the very end once again. And nevertheless, Django is a bloody good time and a fun tribute to the spaghetti western genre with a narrative spin.
You know what I think you are?
What you think I am? No, I don't.
I think you are a bad loser.
And I think you're an abysmal winner.
Reservoir Dogs is a perfect example of less is more. We never see the botched robbery that we're aware of right away in the beginning of the movie, but we are only left guessing as to how the actions being described throughout the film took place, but the sheer panic and paranoia of every character in this film is done so well. Steve Buscemi, in particular as the ever-boasting Mr. Pink, turns out to be the most rational character in the film compared to his panicking and insane counterparts, and it's a huge highlight of the film for me. It's filled with memorable moments, fantastic dialogue, shocking yet entertaining violence, and not to mention an unforgettable finale. At 92 minutes, this film has a perfect runtime and was a huge start to Tarantino's influential career.
Here are your names. Mr. Brown, Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, Mr. Orange, and Mr. Pink.
Why am I Mr. Pink? How about if I'm Mr. Purple? That sounds good to me. I'll be Mr. Purple.
Who cares what your name is?
Yeah, that's easy for you to say. You're Mr. White. You have a cool sounding name. All right, look, if it's no big deal to be Mr. Pink, you want to trade?
What more is there to say about Pulp Fiction? The list should just end with me saying Pulp Fiction and roll credits, but I'll get to my point. The popularity of Pulp Fiction has gotten to a point where people who actually love this movie end up hating it just because of how often people just quote it or talk about it or act like the characters in this movie. Nevertheless, it has earned its place in film history as one of the most influential and successful independent films ever made. For any A24 film lovers or indie film lovers out there right now, you would not see the inflation and influx of independent films being funded and produced at the rapid pace and shown at festivals every single year if it wasn't for the success of this movie. Pulp Fiction transcended the art of independent filmmaking whether you liked the film or not. Its bizarre story sequencing adds an element of originality not really seen before and has been copied endlessly in future films. The film's ability to not really have a specific genre or straightforward narrative works so well that this type of film has become its own genre. It changed the way that films are viewed or how things are advertised or created in television, music, literature, and even internet culture. Every performance is equal parts convincing and hilarious, specifically that of John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson. The way that the story connects to a message that those who choose to continue lives of crimes will meet strange consequences as a response to their actions, as opposed to those who decide to try to get away from the life still won't have an easy way out, is a simple yet brilliant underlying theme. Tarantino built a whole new type of film world that is constantly being copied and has influenced a generation of new filmmakers for better or worse. And for those reasons, that makes Pulp Fiction Tarantino's best film easily, bar none.
Marvin, what do you make of all this?
Man, I don't even have an opinion.
Well, you gotta have an opinion. I mean, do you think that God came down from heaven and stopped us?
Oh, what the fuck's happening? Oh, man, man.
Oh, man, I shot Marvin in the face.
Alright, so that is my ranking of the 9 films of Quentin Tarantino's career so far. I look forward to seeing his 10th film and might even do a reorder once that one comes out whenever it does. If you like this video and if you like all my other content, please like, subscribe, share, show it to your friends, show it to your family, show it to your pets. Your support means everything and will allow me to produce more content. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.